Hi, I'm Valora. At 2 a.m., my sister collapsed at my door, bruised, barely breathing. He said she fell, but I saw the shape of his lies in every fingerprint on her skin. While my family begged for silence, I gathered the proof: her blood, his betrayal, and the truth they all tried to bury. They called me dramatic, vindictive. But when I exposed him, they turned their fury on me. Why was it easier to blame me than to believe her? That night shattered everything, but it was also the night I stopped being quiet. Now I ask you, what would you have done? It was almost 2 a.m. when the knocking started. No, not knocking, pounding, desperate, frantic, hollow-fisted blows against my front door that ripped me out of sleep and dragged me across the hallway barefoot, heart racing. At first, I didn't move. My hand hovered near my bedroom light switch as I strained to listen. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe it was the neighbor's teenage son getting home late. Again. But then I heard it again. 3 sharp slams, followed by something even worse, a sob. Muffled, guttural. The sound of someone who'd run out of air, but not out of pain. I crept toward the front window, pulled the curtain back just enough to see through the darkness, and that's when I saw her. Mayless. She was collapsed on my porch, crumpled like a doll that had been thrown aside. Her head was slumped forward, hair tangled, face half lit by the porch light and smeared with something. Blood? Her arm dangled awkwardly, and I could barely see her chest rising. I didn't remember unlocking the door. I just remember the cold air hitting me as I rushed out, dropping to my knees beside her. Her lips were split, one eye swollen shut. Her cheekbone? Jesus! It looked like it had been kicked in. "Mayless!" I shouted, grabbing her shoulders. "What happened? Who did this to you?" She groaned, her eyes fluttering. I screamed for help even as I fumbled for my phone with shaking fingers, dialing 911. My voice cracked as I gave the dispatcher my address, trying to keep my tone steady, even as I felt her blood soaking into my t-shirt. "I need an ambulance," I said. "Now." The ride to the hospital blurred. I didn't realize I was still in pajama bottoms and a college sweatshirt until a nurse handed me a clipboard and said, "You're listed as next of kin. We need your signature for emergency intervention." Next of kin. The words landed like a stone. Not husband, not mother, not father, me. I signed without hesitation. A police officer appeared shortly after, standing too stiffly, notebook in hand. "Do you know who did this to your sister, ma'am?" "No," I said. "But I have a damn good guess." They whisked Mayless away. Machines beeped. IVs clicked. I sat in a plastic chair, arms crossed tight over my chest, while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A nurse walked over gently. She had kind eyes. "There are signs," she whispered, "of older bruises. This likely wasn't the first time." I nodded, because I'd started to piece it together too. The oversized sunglasses at Thanksgiving, the long sleeves in July, the time she laughed and winced at the same moment, brushing off a fall-down-the-stairs story that didn't make sense. I had asked her back then, point blank, "Is he hitting you?" And she had smiled. God, she smiled, and said, "No, Valora, you're always so dramatic." I wasn't dramatic. I was the youngest, the fixer. The one who always noticed when something was off and got told to mind her business anyway. Tonight, I wasn't going to mind my business. When Mayless came to, it wasn't the first thing she said that broke me. It was the second. "He didn't mean to," she whispered. Her lips were so cracked it hurt to watch her speak. "He was just angry. It was a bad night." "He?" Her eyes fluttered closed for a second. Then she opened them again, panic in their haze. "Don't tell anyone," she rasped. "Please, don't tell Mom. Don't tell anyone." I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed that fire and held her hand tighter. "You need to rest," I said. "Let the doctors work. I'm not going anywhere." And I wasn't. I sat there for hours, staring at the dried blood under her nails, remembering every holiday dinner where she covered for him, every wedding photo where she wore foundation thicker than her smile. At dawn, the nurse returned. "She's stable. We've sedated her to rest. You can sit with her, but she won't wake for a while." I entered the room slowly, the beep of the heart monitor steadying me. She looked so small in that bed, so different from the composed attorney who once argued circles around judges. I stood beside her, brushing a piece of hair from her forehead. "Who did this?" I asked softly. Her lips moved. A whisper. A name. But before she could finish it, before the full name escaped her mouth, her eyes rolled back and she sank again into unconsciousness. But I didn't need the whole name. I already knew. It was him. And this time, I wasn't going to let him hide behind apologies or privilege. This time, I needed proof. She tried to say his name, but passed out before she could finish. I knew it was him. I just needed proof. I didn't sleep. I stayed in that hospital chair, arms crossed, back aching, my mind stuck in a loop of everything I'd seen. Her face swollen beyond recognition, the blood dried along her neckline, the tremble in her fingers as she tried to form the words. I watched her chest rise and fall under the hospital blanket, steady but weak, and felt the weight of every moment I hadn't asked hard enough. Every time I'd let it go, just to keep the peace. By the time dawn broke, the sky turned from indigo to a quiet, shameful gray. Nurses moved more slowly. The machines beeped with less urgency. They said she'd be out for most of the day, that sedation was best for the swelling. I kissed her forehead gently, whispered, "I'll be back," then walked out of that building like a ghost in yesterday's clothes. The sun hadn't fully climbed over the hills as I pulled into my driveway. The air had that damp chill of a morning too early for coffee shops. My fingers hesitated on the steering wheel before I cut the engine. I didn't want to be in my house. I didn't want to sit on the couch where Malis and I used to binge crime shows. I didn't want to look at the kitchen where I once poured her wine while she pretended everything was fine. But I had nowhere else to go. I took a shower, changed clothes, and stared at my reflection longer than I should have. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Something in me had hardened overnight. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was rage. Either way, the girl who tiptoed around family politics was gone. My phone rang just as I was making a second cup of coffee. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered. "Valora." My mother's voice, clipped and icy. "No, hello. No, how's your sister?" I didn't respond right away. "I heard you made a scene at the hospital." "A scene?" "She almost died," I said. "That's not a scene. That's a crime." "You called the police," she snapped, like I'd set the house on fire. "Do you know what this does to our family's name? To Varaon's career?" "Do you hear yourself?" I whispered, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. "You're more worried about his job than your daughter's life?" There was a pause, long, measured. "You don't know what really happened. Malis, she's always been dramatic. You know that." I ended the call. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because if I stayed on the line one more second, I would have said something I couldn't take back. But that wasn't the end of it. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. A family Zoom meeting, scheduled by Callista, our oldest sister. Of course. The kind of meeting where everyone pretends it's about healing, but really, it's about control. I joined. My face square on the screen, among others. Callista in her Manhattan condo, perfect curls and lipstick, sipping some overpriced green smoothie. My mother in her garden room, surrounded by orchids, pursing her lips like she was swallowing something bitter. No sign of Malis, obviously. No sign of Varaon either. Just us women, the matriarch and her daughters. "Valora," Callista started, "what were you thinking?" That was her opening line. "She showed up half dead on my doorstep," I replied. "That's what I was thinking." "We don't know the full story," she said, voice honeyed but sharp, "and involving law enforcement without consulting us." "She's not a PR problem," I cut in. "She's our sister." My mother's voice slid in coldly. "This is a marital matter. You've embarrassed everyone." The words stung, but not because they surprised me, because they were so familiar. This family always protected appearances, always covered bruises with designer sunglasses and called it grace under pressure, always taught us to smile wide and lie wider. And I was done. "I'm not the one who should be embarrassed," I said. "You are. You all saw the signs, and you did nothing." Callista's face darkened. You need to calm down. I leaned forward. No, I need to find out who he's been protecting. She blinked. What? I ended the call. Again. The next part didn't come easy. I'd never done anything like it before. But desperation makes you brave. I followed him. Varayon. 3 days later, I waited in my car parked across from his office. I'd borrowed my friend Aaron's car so he wouldn't recognize it. I'd even worn a hoodie and sunglasses, not to hide, but to distance myself from who I used to be. The silent observer, the quiet youngest. He emerged at noon, laughing with someone over the phone, hair slicked back, expensive shoes, not a mark on him. While my sister lay in a hospital bed looking like she'd fought a war, he walked 2 blocks, turned into a small cafe, sat down at an outdoor table. 5 minutes later, a woman joined him, younger, long legs, red nails, leather jacket too thin for the season. I watched. They leaned in close. He touched her wrist. She giggled. Then he did it. He touched her back, soft, familiar, the way you do when you think no one's watching. But I was watching. I took the picture, zoomed in, caught the look in his eyes, the tilt of his head, her lips brushing his cheek. This wasn't a fling. This was something deeper. And suddenly, everything clicked. He wasn't hiding his abuse because he felt shame. He was hiding her. I didn't want to believe I'd be digging through her cloud backups, legal documents, and old videos. After what she tried to whisper, after watching her drift into unconsciousness on that hospital bed, I made myself do it. I drove to her house 2 days later, having convinced her to let me in. The keys felt heavier in my hand than they ever had. When I stepped inside, the place smelled like antiseptic from the hospital, mixed with the faint perfume she'd been using, something floral, almost delicate. I paused in the hallway, listening. No one there. Varayon must be away. The living room lights were off. I flicked on a lamp and picked up her phone from the coffee table. Screen cracked, smudged, but still working. She'd backed up her photos, videos digitally. I'd seen her save copies of holiday clips, birthday parties, always smiling, laughing, always pretending nothing was wrong. I closed the door behind me, locked it, crossed into the study. Her desktop computer was humming quietly. I settled at the desk, elbows on the wood, and typed in the password I'd seen her write in her notebook. As the desktop loaded, I exhaled. Every image, every file, every video she'd trusted the cloud to protect. There. I browsed through old house surveillance footage, just background. Porch, backyard, guest room doorway. I paused at a date. 9 months ago, a wedding anniversary. I saw him entering through the back door late at night. Lights off inside. But the porch camera caught him, something in his hand. He followed her into a faint hallway, then shadows swallowed them both. I leaned forward. What I saw next broke me. In a hidden corner, just enough out of view, he yanked at her arm, yelled. I couldn't hear words, but could see her recoil. 1-2 sharp movements, him raising his hand, her flinching back. The camera frame shivered and cuts. Then silence. Then later, she emerges from the shadows, dress torn at the sleeve, shoes missing. She walks with a limp. No help, no apology, nothing. My heart pounded. My hands shook. But I saved that video, labeled it proof. I found more. Months of evidence, bruises hidden under shirts, excuses made, injuries explained away. Then I remembered a conversation with Dad, before he died, about the house. He said he wanted Malis to have a place of her own, a base, something she could keep, that she'd be his strongest legacy. I looked up the will, online property records, trust documents. All of them referenced her as owning the house. But something was off. More paperwork showed the deed had been transferred under Varayon's name a few months after Dad passed, quietly, with no explanation, no signatures that seemed valid. I printed everything, video files, house deed, trust papers. I taped them into folders, surveillance, legal docs. My pulse slowed when I saw how much I'd gathered. This wasn't just abuse, it was a plan, one built over time to remove her voice. Evening drew in. I used a burner phone to call my friend Malis, yes, named after her, who works in real estate and knows property law. She asked precise questions. Did I have copies of signatures, see witnesses, find a title transfer, check assessor records? I told her yes. I told her I needed help verifying every document before I confronted anyone. She asked, Valora, do you realize what you're doing? Yes, I said. Because if I don't, one more day she might lose everything. Her name, this house, her life. Malis paused. You're doing the right thing. But be careful. He won't go quietly. I nodded, though she couldn't see. Outside, streetlights flickered on. The wind picked up, leaves rattling against windows. I gathered my things, USB drives, legal papers, flash drives with videos, and left before it got too dark. I drove the quiet route home, avoiding main roads. The folder on the passenger seat felt like a bomb. Back in my apartment, I stacked everything on my kitchen table, the table where we once ate Sunday dinners. On that same table, she used to laugh about her job, about how Veron would surprise her with silly things. Now, there were silent sandwiches, cold coffee, impossibly quiet dinners. I stared at the wall, photographs of happier times, the picture of Dad smiling, the house bathed in sunlight. I thought, this time, truth has a trail. I wasn't alone. I had enough pieces to build the puzzle, even if it hurt. I whispered to myself, he thinks I'm just the quiet one. He has no idea what I'm capable of. He stole her name, her house, and nearly her life, but I was going to take everything back. The morning light spilled weakly through the curtains. I shut my laptop and sat for a moment, listening to the house creak. It felt heavier, quieter. All the evidence I'd gathered lay spread out on my bed. USB drives, notarized copies, video stills. A weight balanced on my chest, half promise, half burden. By mid-afternoon, I was calling Bryn. She used to clean the house. Quiet, steady hands. She never liked to talk too much, but she saw more than anyone. We met in a cafe off Rosecrans, the one with blue awnings that Tillicum Market used to recommend to tourists. She came in wearing a scarf, even though it was warm outside. Old habit, she said. We ordered tea. I resisted the urge to pace. This time I needed calm. You saw things, Bryn, I said. Her eyes dropped. She picked at the edge of her teacup. I did, she whispered. I couldn't say anything. He paid me off after that fall she had. Explained. It was her foot slipping on stairs. Her voice cracked like broken glass. I nodded. What else? I leaned in. There were nights I heard shouting. One time I saw him drag her by the arm. Not gentle, not love, but she covered it up, said she tripped. Her confession sounded like thunder. It confirmed every fear I'd ever tried to ignore. I recorded her, discreetly. Didn't want to frighten her. Later, I copied her voice onto a USB, labeled the file, Bryn Witness. I had enough now to show a pattern, more than one off. Evening came, turning sky gold and pink. I checked my messages. There was something viral online, one of the clips I had saved. Someone had uploaded it. Our back porch camera video showing him yelling. The one with her flinching. I didn't post it. I didn't want to, but someone else did. And it spread fast. Hundreds of comments. People asking if someone would be held accountable. It hurt. In some way more than the silence. Because those same people, those commenters, had never asked us if we were okay. I watched the notifications grow. Then my phone rang. Mother. Callista. Someone from the family group message. You just want attention, Callista typed to me in the message thread that flashed on my screen while I stood in the kitchen. That's why you were always left behind, trying to stir trouble. My heart clenched, but I didn't type back immediately. Mother texted, You shame us. He's the father of your niece and nephew. Think about what you're doing to them. I closed my eyes, let the sound of the kettle boiling fill the small room. I poured water into a mug, inhaled the steam. I needed clarity. I texted Malis. They attacked me again. Callista and Mom say it's about shame. But shame for who? Her reply came fast. Shame should be theirs, not yours. I set the mug down, raised it as if I were blessing myself. Took a sip, tasted bitterness, then warmth. That night, there was a family gathering, organized by Callista in their mother's house. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway. I parked around the block, walked up to the door carrying a folder. The porch lights were off, window shades drawn. Through the window, I saw Mother and Callista inside. Laughter. Fake laughter. Over wine. Phone screens glowed in circles. Instagram, filters, selfies. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Harder. Callista opened the door in silk pajamas, hair pinned up. She looked surprised. Her eyes were red, maybe from crying or just acting. "Valora?" she said. "You shouldn't be here." "I have something to show you," I said, stepping forward. Mother appeared behind her, alarm in her face. I pushed my folder toward Callista's hands. "Watch this," I said, calm but fierce. I pulled out my phone. I showed her the video where he dragged Malus, the surveillance camera footage. The exaggeration she said was just imagination. The proof she said didn't exist. Callista's face paled. Mother's breath caught in her throat. "You lied," Callista whispered. Mother didn't say anything. Then I said loud, "I'm done hiding. I'm done letting you treat my sister like her silence mattered more than her life." Silence. For a moment, I heard only my breathing, the distant cars, the hum of night settling over our street. "I'll be publishing these," I continued, voice steady. "Emails, video, statements. The world will see what you chose to protect." Callista's eyes filled with tears, not the kind that wash away guilt, but the kind that burn. Mother closed the door in my face. I walked back to my car alone, the folder tucked under my arm. In the dark, the street smelled of jasmine and rain. Earthy, fresh, real. Some secrets want to be found, and they will be. They wanted me to stop, to hush, but I was just getting started. 2 weeks had passed since that night. I kept my routine. Hospital visits, stacks of paperwork, late nights sifting through legal filings and video backups. But other than me, I sensed the world around us breathing easier, or pretending to. Varian's sleek invitations had started showing up in mailboxes, on social media feeds. Gala this, benefit that. Rebuild public trust, it said. I saw the press releases and the smiling faces, everyone nodding like nothing had happened. Then one morning, as I sat with my coffee in the kitchen, my phone pinged. A group email from the family thread. Subject, fundraiser. Worded carefully. "We know these are difficult times, but healing must move forward together." Below, an RSVP link. My name was not on the list. Worse, they'd explicitly said, for invitees only. No +1, no family friends. Just a list that excluded me. My chest tightened. The betrayal was sharp in that moment. They weren't just excluding me. They were pretending I didn't exist. After what Malus had endured, after what I had uncovered, they were rewriting reality. I wanted to respond with something raw. Something public, but I had already chosen a better way. I grabbed my jacket and headed toward the venue, the Grand Ocean's banquet hall. It stood perched above the Pacific, glass front shining in the late afternoon sun. Valets, red carpet, photographers. It felt like walking through someone else's perfect world. I parked a block away, my heart rumbling in my ribcage. Every click of my heels across concrete was loud. I pulled out my folder. Inside were files marked "Before the Mask," USB drives, video clips, signed statements, voice recordings. I had prepared these for this moment. Men and women in gowns and tuxedos drifted past, laughter echoing, champagne flutes raised, cameras flashing. I stayed back, just beyond the crowd, near a palm tree, watching. I spotted Varian stepping out onto the stage podium, bow tie straight, stage lights glinting off his cufflinks. He began his speech, words about community, restoration, compassion. "We must all come together," he said, voice rich, confident. "Let our values shine through, regardless of what the noise says." I felt bile. He talked about honesty while hiding his own secrets, about value while stealing hers. As he continued, I slipped inside, quietly, watching from the side of the hall. I recorded the audience. Donors, friends, family. I recognized several former employees of Varayon's construction company, people who had been in his orbit, people who believed his public persona. Their applauses sounded hollow to me. Late in the night, just before dessert, I waited for the right slot. My plan: distribute encrypted USB drives containing my Before the Mask folder to a few key people. A journalist I trusted, small business owners who'd been affected by Varayon's charity fraud rumors, one investor who'd publicly expressed concern about Varayon's ethics. I left them anonymously at their seats. No note, just a plug-and-play drive with everything. I watched one drive resting beside the table setting of a past collaborator. Attendants cleared plates. Music swelled. I slipped outside, breathing in salty air. Waves crashed somewhere not far. The night smelled clean and merciful. While crossing the valet area, I overheard someone whisper to Varayon's publicist, "Did you see this drive lying there? Who put it there?" Her reply, "Probably one of the activists. Everyone's watching now." The moment felt electric, waiting for fallout, for what would happen when someone curious plugged in that drive. Maybe a reporter, maybe a board member, someone whose reputation depended on seeing truth. I stood on the sidewalk by my car, my throat tight, my hands trembling, not from fear, I told myself, but from knowing I held the upper hand, from courage finally earned. The air cooled, valet lights glowing. My phone buzzed, screenshot of event photos, someone tagging me in a comment. She's showing up despite not being invited. Talk about guts. A small thing, but it mattered. I drove home slowly, headlights cutting through the night mist, the waves visible through cliffs, relentless and rhythmic, reminding me that truth, like the tide, eventually returns. When I got inside, I placed the last USB drive in a small velvet box and set it on my coffee table. I closed my eyes, listened to the silence that followed the storm I'd helped unleash. They organized everything. The gala was polished down to the smallest detail, the polished marble floors, the glittering chandeliers, the smile-plastered greeters at the doors. Every guest wore redemption like a costume, tailored suits, jewel-bright gowns, faces painted with charm and civility, secrets hid beneath candlelight and polite applause. It was the kind of evening where reputation was currency, and the show was everything. I stood off stage, half hidden in the wings, a burner phone cold in my trembling hands. From here I could see Varon pacing at the podium, clearing his throat with theatrical precision. The crowd hushed, and the cameras turned, hungry lenses waiting to capture his rebirth. He began with words practiced too many times, his voice smooth, grave, dressed in sincerity. "We must rebuild the trust that binds our community. We must learn forgiveness. We must move forward." He sounded convincing, almost genuine. For anyone who didn't know better, he might have been believable. But I knew better. My jaw ached from clenching. My heart pounded, not from fear anymore, but from certainty. In the folder pressed against my ribs was everything I'd collected: video stills, statements, timestamps, the fragments of truth that added up to undeniable proof. I'd hidden in silence long enough. Tonight, the silence would end. Varayon lifted his glass, offering a toast to hope, to second chances, to the performance of integrity. His smile widened for the cameras, but I knew the eyes behind that smile. I'd seen them narrow in cruelty, harden in threats. This was his mask, and tonight I would rip it away. The projector flickered once, a hiccup in the carefully scripted evening. People shifted in their seats. A technician tapped the side of the screen. Varayon frowned, just slightly, then pressed on with his words, and then the video began to play. The first image was grainy, but clear enough. The back porch camera had caught everything. Varayon's body lunging forward, his voice raised in fury, Malus shrinking back in fear. The timestamp glowed faintly in the corner. The sound carried across the room, his tone sharp, commanding, filled with menace. There was a collective gasp. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. Glasses clinked as someone froze mid-sip. I saw Celine, his mistress, her smile collapsing into horror, her hands gripping the tablecloth until her knuckles whitened. On the screen, the moment everyone dreaded came into focus. Varayon lifting his hand, Malus flinching away. The silence in the room was suffocating. Then his voice roared through the speakers. "If you ever say anything, I'll bury you myself." The words rang like a death knell. Flashbulbs popped from the press. Gasps turned to murmurs, then to fragments of outrage. People shifted in their seats, half rising, torn between disbelief and recognition. Varen spun toward the screen, his mask breaking, his face drained of its carefully cultivated composure. What is this?" he stammered. "This is taken out of—" No one listened. Not the board members who had defended him. Not the donors who had poured money into his schemes. Not the community leaders who once smiled at his side. The evidence was louder than any excuse. I stepped forward from the shadows. My legs shook, but my voice inside was steady, fierce. I wasn't hiding anymore. Then the rear doors opened, and 2 police officers entered. Their uniforms caught the light. A ripple of sound spread through the crowd. Murmurs, gasps, phones lifted to record. Every camera lens turned, every eye followed. The officers walked straight toward the podium, their presence cutting through the chaos like a blade. Varayon tried to compose himself, lifting his chin. "This is absurd," he barked, but his voice cracked. One officer placed a firm hand on his shoulder. The other spoke clearly, his voice carrying across the hall. "Varayon Arthur Keller, you are under arrest for domestic assault, obstruction of justice, and financial misconduct." The words settled like a hammer blow. Chairs scraped against marble. People whispered, some covering their faces, others recording, unwilling to miss a single second of history unfolding. Varayon turned his head toward me, his eyes locked on mine. Shock, betrayal, disbelief swirling together. He had believed he controlled everything. He had always believed he controlled me. But not this. Outside, through the glass walls of the hall, I saw red and blue lights spinning, sirens wailing faintly in the distance. The city seemed to pause as he was led away in handcuffs. Reporters shouted. Guests cried out. Some turned away in shame. Others stood frozen, phones raised high to capture his fall. I didn't cheer. I didn't laugh. My satisfaction wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, washing through me like a tide pulling years of weight from my chest. Justice didn't need applause. It needed truth. On the live stream, comments poured in faster than I could read. Finally. She's brave. Justice at last. More than 500,000 people were watching as the facade cracked open and crumbled in real time. As Varayon disappeared through the doors, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen lit up with a name I knew too well. Callista. Her message appeared in sharp letters. "You couldn't let us deal with it privately?" My chest tightened. I swallowed hard. I thought of every night I'd been silenced, every bruise explained away, every moment I'd been told to stay quiet for the sake of appearances. They called it privacy. I knew better. I typed slowly, deliberately. You called it private. I called it prison. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, stepped out into the night air. The city skyline shimmered across the bay, lights glittering against the dark ocean beyond. The air was cold, bracing, alive. I walked away from the crowd, hands loose at my sides, chest burning with something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their forgiveness. For the first time, I understood that power wasn't about hiding my truth. Power came from speaking it. Varayon was gone. But as I looked back once, I knew. The real battle was only beginning. The battle with those I still called family. He was gone. But the real battle was just beginning. This time, not with Varayon, but with those I had once trusted to be family. 2 days had passed since the gala ended in chaos, since Varayon was escorted out under the cold brightness of chandeliers and camera flashes. People spoke of his downfall as if it were a spectacle, a performance staged for their entertainment. Yet in my apartment, the city lights outside my window cut too sharply against the glass, as though the world itself had not yet caught up to what had happened inside those walls. I woke early, pulling on a faded sweatshirt and jeans, my hair still damp with the smell of last night's street rain. My hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee as I scrolled through my phone. Notifications multiplied by the hundreds, news outlets tagging my name, social media threads dissecting every expression I had worn that night, private messages flooding in. Some praised me. Brave. Hero. Others tore me apart. Attention seeker. Home wrecker. Show off. Each word was a needle aimed straight at my skin. But I refused to bleed for them. I let the words slide across me, sharp but shallow, unwilling to pierce. By mid-morning, I was driving to the hospital. The streets were still damp from overnight showers, car tires hissing over wet asphalt. Malis had been moved from intensive care to the recovery floor. I found her propped in bed, her face pale, cheeks swollen, eyes heavy but open. Gentle violin music played from a speaker on the bedside table, soft, tentative notes that seemed to soothe her in ways words could not. "How are you feeling?" I asked, sliding into the chair beside her. She blinked slowly. "Better than last night," she murmured, her voice husky but clear. "Thank you." I nodded, watching the IV sites, the careful bandaging along her arm. She was fragile, yes, but alive. "It will take time," I said quietly, reaching for her hand. She let me hold it, and for a moment, that was enough. Then footsteps sounded in the hallway. The door cracked open. Mother stood there. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her posture no longer straight and sharp as in the official photos, where pearls gleamed at her neck and her smile was always poised. She lingered in the threshold, eyes darting not to me, but to the generic wall art, the patterned floor tiles, anywhere but directly at my face. "Mom," I said, uncertain, unprepared. For a moment, she didn't move. My heart urged me to bridge the distance, to pull her in, to demand something she had denied me for years. But then, slowly, she stepped forward. Her hand landed on my shoulder, only for a breath, a touch brief and trembling, but warm all the same. No apology, no explanation, just that fleeting contact. I swallowed against the knot in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered, though the words felt like a betrayal of everything I had carried. She nodded once, her lips pressed tight, then turned and walked away without speaking. I watched her go, my chest heavy with the weight of what was given and what was still withheld. That evening, back in my kitchen, I found an envelope lying on the counter. It was postmarked a year ago, though I had never seen it before. My fingers trembled as I slid it open. Inside was a letter written in my father's steady hand, his ink dark, his script strong. At the top he had scrawled, "If you ever need to know the truth." The lamplight spilled across the paper as I read, old photographs scattered on the table around me. 3 little girls in sundresses, frozen in time, our smiles carved from sunshine and innocence. His words, however, carried none of that joy. He confessed. He wrote of what he had seen, what he had ignored. The bruises on Malis's arms, the silences that lasted too long, the laughter that sounded brittle. He admitted he had known about Varayon's manipulation. He admitted he had chosen fear of scandal over action, fear of loss. He let excuses smother intervention. Line after line, regret filled the page. "Of all my daughters," he wrote, "you were the one I regret overlooking the most." My vision blurred with tears. I pressed the letter to my chest, grief and validation tangling inside me. Old wounds reopened, but at the same time, something fragile stitched through them. Worth. He had seen me, even if he never said it while he lived. I didn't call Mother. I didn't text Sister. And I didn't send the letter to anyone. I read it again, letting the words echo inside me, letting them both break and heal me. Later that night, I stood before my bathroom mirror. The reflection stared back at me, dark circles beneath my eyes, jaw set firm, gaze steady despite everything. The bruises were not mine, but the pain carved across my face belonged to me all the same. And in that reflection, I didn't see weakness anymore. I saw strength. A woman who had been told her entire life that silence meant survival. A woman who finally understood silence was nothing more than a cage. Quiet doesn't mean weak. The next morning, I carried my father's letter back to the hospital. I sat at Malis's side, unfolded the paper, and read small portions aloud, just enough for her to hear. I saw. I feared. I regret. Her lips trembled. She reached over, her thin fingers gripping mine. We didn't need more words than that. The letter spoke for us both. Outside, the sky bled pink through the hospital windows. A nurse passed by carrying a tray of water cups. From down the hall came the sound of someone playing a soft piano melody, each note drifting like a prayer into the sterile air. I let those sounds anchor me. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about how to hide or endure. I was thinking about what must come next. Not anger, not vengeance, not the endless cycle of shouting and bruises and silence. No, what I wanted now was peace, but peace tied to justice, peace that insisted on truth. Because if I was ever going to heal, I had to believe I deserved more than whispered apologies and fragile gestures. I deserved the right to speak and to be heard. That evening, I returned home, unfolded the letter once more, and placed it in my journal. I stared again at my reflection, this time with no fear. I wasn't ashamed of who I had become. For the first time in my life, I was proud. I wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for peace. And I knew exactly what had to be done. This time, the courtroom was filled with tension so thick I could taste it. The day was crisp, late morning light flooding the tall windows of the San Diego courthouse. I wore dark suit pants and a modest blouse, pulled my hair back. My skin tingled under the overhead lights. The jury sat in rows, faces impassive. Veron sat at the defendant's table, hands folded, trying to appear composed. Callista beside him, pale and rigid. My mother in the back, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. When the judge called the court to order, I stood. My voice didn't shake. I wished I could say I was proud of how far I'd come, but really, I was just relieved the moment had arrived. I took the stand. Every step was deliberate, each breath measured. I laid out everything: the video files, the testimonies, the deed transfers, the phishing of charity funds to shell accounts. I described how Veron used gifts and influence to veil his wrongdoing. I told them about Melis's bruises, Bryn's statements, the father's letter. Every piece pointed to truth, not rumors. When the prosecutor asked me about the timeline of property transfer, I showed the document with the date. Dad's will clearly named Melis as the sole owner of our childhood home, I said. But within 6 months of his passing, she had no legal claim. The deed was transferred quietly, without her consent. The courtroom murmured. Callista's lips parted, eyes wide. Then came twist S15. During cross-examination, Veron's lawyer tried to discredit me, claiming someone tampered with records. He said I was misled by tech tools. But then we revealed that Veron's mistress had purchased decor from a business listed on the shell company used for the charity funds. That supplier invoice matched the property deed transfer date. The truth exposed him in layers: financial fraud under false public goodwill. The judge paused. The jury leaned forward. You could hear the gasp as people realized how extensive the deception was. Media scribes, courtroom artists, neighbors, family friends, everyone was watching. Live streaming feeds exploded. I saw tears in the gallery. Some people nodded, relieved. Some stared at Veron like they couldn't believe they had trusted him. Celine gasped, face flushed. Callista's hand covered her mouth. I stood firm. I did not break. I felt satisfaction settle. Not bitter, more like a settling of storm clouds after lightning. Justice was closing in. Then, before the verdict, I had one more moment. Twist S16. I carried an envelope to the lectern, addressed to him. Inside, a letter I had written. Not for court, not for public, for him. I didn't bury you. You did that yourself. I just handed you the shovel. A small metaphor, but it mattered. I sealed it with quiet pride. Your silence will be your legacy. Mine will be the truth. I read it aloud, my hands steady, eyes level. Some in court gasped. Others leaned in as if they had to hear it themselves. Veron's face flickered. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Callista's eyes filled with tears. My mother's mouth tightened. I felt their weight. Shame, disbelief, truth laid bare. The judge pronounced, guilty. Veron's shoulders slumped. The gavel struck. The echo of that sound felt like finality. As I was walking out, courtroom packed, cameras aiming, reporters shouting questions, a voice whispered behind me, "Enjoy your moment." It won't last. I paused, turned slowly. Callista stood there, face flushed and lined. "I don't need it to last. I just needed it to matter," I replied. My voice soft, but it carried. Outside, the Pacific wind bit at my cheeks. I let people shout, cameras click. I didn't shrink. I did not flinch. Justice was done. But healing? That was something else entirely. Justice was done. That much was certain. Court papers were signed, apologies were made, and the system, for once, had worked in my favor. But healing? That was something else entirely. Slower, heavier, like trying to learn how to breathe again after years of holding your lungs too tight. 6 months later, I sit on the porch of our small coastal bungalow. The air smells of salt and morning mist, drifting in on the soft breeze that carries gull cries and the far-off crash of waves against rocks. The sun is only beginning to climb, staining the horizon in faint pink and amber. The porch wood is weathered, edges splintered but strong, and beneath my palm the grain feels like a map, lines carved by storms, sun, and time. Inside, I hear Melis's laughter. Light, sudden, almost surprising. It's clearer than I've heard it in years. She's been in trauma therapy for months now, meeting people who know the language of shadows, who help her name the things she once buried so deep they nearly disappeared. Each week, she comes home carrying pieces of herself she thought were lost forever. She smiles about old things again. Dad's corny jokes that made us roll our eyes, the midnight popsicle raids from the freezer when we were kids, the songs we made up during long car rides. Her smile no longer looks borrowed. It looks like hers. Our home isn't grand. The bungalow is modest, a pale blue with shutters the color of sea glass. Linen curtains catch the light when the wind pushes through open windows. Seashell wind chimes knock softly against one another, their music fragile but soothing. The place feels lived in, cared for, layered with new safety. It's ours, hers and mine, and that togetherness makes it sacred. My own life has shifted too. I started a nonprofit for survivors of domestic abuse. I called it The Quiet Among Us. The name came to me one night when I realized how many of us survive silently, unnoticed, waiting for the chance to be heard. Now, the nonprofit offers listening ears, legal help, and spaces to feel safe again. I hire therapists, caseworkers, volunteers, some of them people who once worked under Varayon's charities, before her empire of lies crumbled. It's strange, poetic almost, to see people who once turned away from me now pouring their energy into helping others find strength. This work keeps me grounded. It gives shape to my days, reminding me that the worst things I endured can be reshaped into tools for someone else's freedom. But the family, our family, remains fractured. Mother sends birthday cards to Melis. They arrive in pastel envelopes, each signed the same. Love, Mother. No phone calls, no apologies. The words feel thin, like someone writing on paper that was already torn. Callista moved to Oregon, starting over with a new job, a new circle of friends, a life photographed in gardens and filtered sunlight. Her social media beams with curated happiness, smiling with flowers, holding lattes, pretending the past was simply a season that passed. But between me and Melis, we know better. What doesn't get posted is the truth, guilt, regret, silence pressing in between the pixels. Every so often, I hear Dad's voice echo back from memory. Quiet doesn't mean weak. He said it when I was young, but the words ring now like a church bell, steady, unrelenting. I've carried them with me through every bruise, every courtroom, every whispered rumor. Healing doesn't mean erasing what happened. Healing means carrying it with enough strength that it no longer defines every waking hour. There are mornings when grief still catches me off guard. Sometimes I cry because I never got Melis's full confession that night in the hospital, never heard every name, every detail of what she endured. Sometimes I wake from dreams where I feel my mother's hand on my shoulder, gentle, yes, but distant, as if she were touching someone she no longer knew. I wonder if it was love or fear. Maybe both. One afternoon, I sit at my desk and log into the blog I started months ago. I titled it, "The Night My Sister Knocked." The words pour out of me, unedited, urgent. Some people only love silence. That's how they survive. But I found life in speaking out. When I publish it, responses begin trickling in almost instantly. Survivors comment, share their own stories, send private messages of gratitude. One woman from a small town writes, "Because of you, I left the house I thought I could never escape." I read her words 3 times, my throat tight. That quiet triumph stays with me. It isn't loud, it doesn't erase scars, but it gives them meaning. Community grows in unexpected ways. The owner of a local coffee shop delivers pastries for Melis's therapy group, leaving them with handwritten notes. For strength. For comfort. We sip hot drinks together on the porch, seagulls dipping low over the waves, and for once the world doesn't feel like it's bracing itself for us to fail. It just feels normal. Mother's cards keep coming. Holidays, birthdays, anniversaries of things she never acknowledged in person. I open them, read them, fold them neatly, and keep them in a small box on my desk. The signature's always the same. Love, Mother. Just words. Thin. Insufficient. I don't send replies. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And I've learned to be okay with that. At dusk, Melis and I walk along the beach. The tide pulls at our footprints, erasing them almost as soon as we make them. We don't speak much. We don't need to. Sometimes healing is the absence of noise, the space to breathe side by side. I glance at her. Her posture is straighter, her eyes clearer. She tells me she dreams again, dreams without panic, without shadows. Dreams of simple things, like climbing trees or cooking pasta. I smile and tell her she's brave. She laughs softly, a sound that carries over the waves. Back home, I light a lamp on the desk, its glow spilling across papers and the journal I keep close. My latest blog post has reached hundreds of readers. I wrote, "This isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming the right to be heard." Survivors send more messages, each one reminding me that truth echoes further than fear. I close my journal, pour myself a cup of tea, and step to the window. Beyond the dunes, seabirds arc in wide circles. The horizon shifts from pink to purple, fading into night. I breathe in the stillness. It isn't peace in the sense of forgetting. It's peace in the sense of surviving, of carrying scars without letting them own me. Scars remain, yes. They mark me. They mark Melis. But they also remind us of what we've come through. They no longer hold us down. I close my eyes and let the ocean's rhythm steady me. Justice gave me peace. But truth gave me power. What this story truly shows us is that silence, while often seen as peacekeeping, can become the most dangerous kind of loyalty. When we choose to look away, to stay quiet for the sake of appearances, we enable harm to thrive behind closed doors. But the moment someone dares to speak up, not just for themselves but for someone they love, everything can change. So here's my question for you. How far would you go to protect someone who's been hurt, especially when the threat wears the mask of family? If this story moved you or made you think, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that challenge, heal, and inspire. Your voice matters, and so does your presence here.